Every night, America's highways turn into something else, something darker. These aren't just roads. They're corridors of fear, mystery, and encounters no one can explain. In this compilation, you'll hear 11 of the most disturbing true trucker horror stories ever reported. Real drivers, real events, and real terror. So buckle up, turn down the lights, and if you're brave enough, ride with us through rain and nightmare. This is Compilation Volume 2, and it's not for the faint of heart. They always tell you trucking's a lonely job. I used to think I liked the solitude. No bosses breathing down my neck, no coworkers chatting my ears off. Just me, my rig, and the road. But something changed a few months ago on a long-haul run through the Rockies. I had just picked up a refrigerated load from Boise and was headed down toward Denver. It was around 2 a.m., no other cars for miles. Just the steady hum of the engine and my headlights slicing through the mist hanging low on the highway. That's when I noticed it. I was coming around a curve when I glanced at the rearview mirror, just habit, and saw something that made my stomach twist. A shadow. Not just a vague blur or trick of light. No, this was the outline of a person sitting in the sleeper cab behind me. I could make out a head, shoulders, maybe even arms resting on their knees. I spun around instantly. No one. Just my pillow and sleeping bag, still rumpled from earlier. I laughed it off, told myself I was tired. Maybe the light caught something weird, my jacket hanging on the hook or a reflection. That's all it was. But 10 miles later, I glanced again, and there it was, still sitting there. I pulled off at the next turnout, some gravel patch just off the shoulder, empty as hell. I climbed out of the cab, flashlight in hand, opened the sleeper compartment from the outside. Nothing, no footprints, no broken locks, just cold air and my racing heart. I left the dome light on inside as I got back in the driver's seat. I figured, if someone is hiding back there, I'll see them in the mirror, lit up plain as day. But nothing showed, until I turned off the light again. When the cab went dark, the rear view lit up, not with a reflection, but with that same damn shadow, just faint enough to raise every hair on my neck. I drove the rest of that stretch in silence. No music, no radio chatter. Just the occasional glance at the mirror and the sense that someone was watching me from the back. At sunrise, I made it to a Flying J and parked for some rest. I told myself I needed sleep, that I was hallucinating, but I couldn't bring myself to lie down in the sleeper. Instead, I bought a dashboard cam at the truck stop and mounted it on the windshield, facing back toward the cabin. I didn't even know what I was hoping to prove. That night, after my delivery in Denver, I pulled into a motel lot and parked for a few hours. I decided to check the dashcam footage just to settle my nerves. For most of the video, it was normal. Me driving, yawning, sipping coffee. Nothing weird. Until the timestamp hit 3:13 a.m., somewhere between Aspen and Leadville. The screen flickered for a moment, static humming through the audio. Then the figure appeared. A full-bodied shadow, blacker than the darkness around it, standing upright right behind my seat. No face, no features, just a void. It was there for exactly 6 seconds. Then, gone. No movement, no fading. Just gone. I rewound it, played it again. Again. My hands were shaking. I didn't sleep that night either. I've told maybe 3 people about it since. They all laugh or say I was sleep deprived. Some say it's just pareidolia, seeing patterns in shadows, but none of them saw that footage. I deleted it the next morning. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to risk seeing it again. These days I still drive, still haul solo, but I keep a cloth over my rearview mirror at night. Because once you've seen something back there that shouldn't exist, you can't ever unsee it. It was supposed to be a routine drive through the quiet Norwegian countryside. Nothing unusual, just another night on the road between Hønefoss and Jevnaker. But what I encountered in the darkness that evening still lingers in the back of my mind. A man in a yellow raincoat standing in the middle of the highway, trying to force his way into passing cars. Who was he? What was he running from? And why did he seem more lost than dangerous? What happened next, I'll never forget. The rain had been steady for over an hour, drumming against the windshield like 1,000 tiny fists. It wasn't a storm, not exactly, just that cold, relentless Norwegian drizzle that blurred your vision and soaked you to the bone if you stepped outside for even a moment. I was heading from Hunefoss to Jevnaker, a route I'd taken countless times. I knew every bend, every stretch of dark asphalt flanked by thick forests and empty fields. It was supposed to be just another quiet night drive. But as I crested a gentle hill and started down a long, dimly lit stretch of highway, my headlights picked up something, no, someone, standing in the road. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or maybe a reflective traffic marker. But as I got closer, my heart began to pound. A man, in a yellow raincoat, standing dead center in my lane. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there, staring at my truck like he'd been waiting for me. I hit the brakes, hard. The tires squealed against the wet road, and I felt the back end of the vehicle twitch slightly before regaining grip. I managed to stop a good 20 meters from him, but instead of stepping aside or waving me down like any rational person would, the man turned and started walking toward me. That's when I saw him reach for the handle of the car in front of me, a small hatchback. The driver must have seen him too, because the car suddenly swerved and sped away, tires spitting water in panic. The man didn't flinch. He simply moved on to the next vehicle behind it, then another, trying door after door, systematically, like he was looking for something or someone. And that's when the fear truly set in. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't acting like someone who needed help. His movements were too deliberate, too calm in the chaos, like he knew exactly what he was doing. I locked my doors without thinking, hands slick with sweat despite the chill. My hazard lights clicked steadily in the background, the rhythmic sound unnerving in the tense silence. The man was now just a few cars away, still checking doors, oblivious to the growing terror around him. It wasn't just that he was trying to get in, it was how out of place he looked. The yellow raincoat, drenched and clinging to his thin frame, the way his head tilted slightly, unnaturally, as if he were listening for something no one else could hear. His eyes never met anyone's, not even mine. By the time he reached the car beside me, I was frozen, not from the cold, from something deeper, primal, that instinctive sense that something was terribly wrong, and I had no idea what I was about to let into my life. I don't know what made me do it. Curiosity, instinct, or maybe some misplaced sense of responsibility. But when the man finally reached my truck, I didn't drive away like the others. I kept the engine running, doors locked, and slowly rolled down the window just a few inches, enough to hear him. Or so I thought. He didn't speak. He didn't plead for help or say he was in trouble. He just stood there, soaked to the skin, staring at me with eyes that seemed completely vacant, void of panic, void of fear, just gone, like he wasn't fully there. "Are you okay?" I asked cautiously, keeping one hand on the wheel, the other hovering near the lock button. No answer. Only a faint sound escaped his mouth, a dry, raspy exhale, like someone trying to remember how to breathe. Then his hand rose slowly, fingers trembling, and he placed it flat against the window. I flinched. His palm left a wet print, his nails chipped and dirty, as though he'd clawed at something recently, or someone. He looked young, mid-30s maybe, but everything about him felt aged, weathered, not just by the rain, but by something deeper. Trauma, perhaps, or madness. For a brief moment, we just stared at each other. I didn't know what he wanted. I couldn't even tell if he was truly seeing me. There was no recognition in his expression, no urgency, just that eerie stillness that made my skin crawl. Then, without warning, he moved. Not quickly, not aggressively, but with that same eerie calmness, he walked to the passenger side and tried the door handle. Locked. I felt my entire body tense. Then the rear door, also locked. Then he circled to the back of the truck, out of sight. I shifted into gear immediately, heart racing. Was he trying to get in the sleeper cab? Was he hiding back there? I couldn't take any chances. I was about to drive off when I heard it. 3 loud, slow knocks on the back panel. Not random, deliberate, like a signal. Knock, knock, knock. I stared into the rearview mirror, expecting to see his shadow, or worse, but there was nothing, just the endless drizzle and the faint blinking of my hazard lights. Panic was clawing at my chest now. I jumped out, grabbing my flashlight, determined to confront whatever this was. But when I rounded the side of the truck, he wasn't there. He had vanished. I checked under the trailer, behind the wheels, even scanned the dark tree line near the edge of the rest stop. Nothing. And then I felt it. A presence, like eyes on my back, not physical but heavy, suffocating, like I'd just stepped into something ancient and unexplainable. I got back in the truck and locked the doors so fast I almost jammed the latch. I told myself he was just a man, just another lost soul in the wrong place. But the way he moved, the way he looked right through me, no. This was something else, something I should have never engaged with. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I left the rest stop, sped away really, heart pounding and hands shaking, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Every flicker of light on the road, every shadow cast by my own headlights seemed to move with intent. I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see the man in the yellow raincoat sitting calmly in the back seat, even though I knew that was impossible. At least I hoped it was, but that eerie knocking, the rhythm of it, kept repeating in my head, over and over. Knock, knock, knock. I kept telling myself it was just a strange encounter. Maybe the guy was mentally unstable. Maybe he needed help. But something didn't add up. Why didn't he speak? Why did he vanish so suddenly, leaving no trace? Why did the air around him feel so wrong? By the time I reached the next town, it was well past midnight. I pulled into a truck stop, parked near a row of other sleeping semis, and tried to calm myself down. I even laughed a little, trying to shake off the fear. But the relief didn't last, because when I walked around to check my trailer before calling it a night, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were muddy handprints, faint, smeared but unmistakably human, on the back door of the trailer. And not just one, at least 5. Each about the same size as the man's palm from earlier, as if he had followed me, as if he had held on for the ride. That's when I realized I had never actually checked the trailer itself. Swallowing my fear, I unlocked the latch and slowly swung open the heavy doors. My flashlight cut through the darkness inside, revealing only the familiar rows of secured freight. Everything looked undisturbed, but the air was different, heavy, stagnant, and there was a smell, something faint but sharp. Wet clothes? Mold? Or something else? I shut the doors quickly and backed away. For the rest of the night, I sat in the cab with every light on, windows closed tight, and the engine idling low. I couldn't explain why, but I was certain that opening the trailer had invited something in, or maybe just confirmed what had already gotten in earlier. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were broken and strange. I saw the man's face, pale, water dripping from his chin, eyes wide and empty. He didn't move in the dream. He just stood there, watching. And when I woke up, gasping for air and soaked in sweat, there was condensation on the inside of my windshield. 3 long streaks, as if someone had run their fingers down the glass from the passenger side. I was alone, but I didn't feel alone. Not anymore. The next few days blurred into one long, sleepless stretch of paranoia. I drove through towns, across empty highways, past diners and gas stations, but I never truly felt present. My mind was stuck in that rain-soaked moment, in the stillness of that man's gaze. Every reflection in my mirrors made my stomach twist. Every unfamiliar sound in the cab had me turning my head. I started avoiding rest stops entirely, but the worst part was the dreams. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back at that rest stop. The same cold wind, the same flickering lights, the same yellow coat. Only this time, I was the one knocking on someone else's door, lost, desperate, and ignored. One night, maybe 4 days after it all began, I parked in a well-lit lot behind a trucker diner in Kansas. It was busy, loud, the kind of place where you could pretend nothing strange had ever happened to you. I grabbed a booth, ordered coffee, and tried to drown the thoughts with noise and caffeine. That's when I overheard another driver talking at the next table. "Yeah, old Highway 9, just before the county line," he said, gesturing with his spoon. "Real bad stretch. Couple drivers went missing last year, always in the rain. Same spot. They say a guy in a yellow slicker's been seen walking the shoulder." My blood turned to ice. I leaned over, interrupting. "Did you say yellow raincoat?" The man nodded, surprised. "Yeah, why?" I didn't answer. I just sat there, heart pounding. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the first. I didn't sleep that night either. But it wasn't fear that kept me awake. It was something else. A gnawing, guilty feeling. I had seen something, someone, not entirely human. A presence stuck between places, reaching out, and I hadn't helped. In my mind, I kept hearing that knock. The one on my trailer, the one on my soul. Knock, knock, knock. Weeks passed. I never saw the man again. But I started keeping an emergency kit for strangers. Bottled water, blankets, a first aid kit, flashlight. I even added a second dash cam, just in case. Maybe it was for them, maybe it was for me. Somewhere along the line, I stopped asking whether he was real, whether he was a ghost, a hallucination, or something far darker. I started asking something more important. What if it was me out there one day, cold, alone, knocking, and would anyone stop? We like to think the road is just pavement and miles, but there are places out there, forgotten places, where time folds in on itself and echoes cry through the rain. If you're lucky, you'll never stop there. But if you do, and someone knocks on your window, don't pretend you don't hear it. In the winter of 2010, Ethan Raleigh, a 24-year-old UPS driver, had been on the job for just under 2 years. Based out of Garland County, Arkansas, he worked a rural route that snaked through pockets of poverty, trailer homes, and wooded dead-end roads most residents wouldn't travel after dark. Ethan knew the area well. He'd made hundreds of deliveries through back roads and poorly lit drives surrounded by pine forest and overgrown brush. On Thursday, December 16th, the temperature had dropped below freezing by early evening. Ethan was nearing the end of his shift. His last few deliveries took him to an isolated stretch on the outskirts of Hot Springs Village, where a cluster of old trailer homes sat beyond a rusted cattle gate and a gravel road that didn't appear on standard GPS maps. According to the manifest, the package required a signature, which meant he couldn't just leave it on the doorstep and move on. That annoyed him. It was late, already dark, and the house in question sat completely alone, surrounded on all sides by forest. As Ethan pulled his truck up to the mailbox, the only visible house on the road emerged from the dark. A faded white trailer, patched with tin, a tarp-covered window, and what looked like animal bones hanging on string from the porch awning. There were no lights on. Still, he grabbed the box, one of the heaviest of the day, and approached the door. No doorbell. He knocked, and then knocked again. After a moment, a curtain twitched. Footsteps shuffled behind the door. Then, slowly, the door opened. A woman stood there, around 60, pale, unkempt, with gray hair tied back and trembling hands. She wore a flannel nightgown under a stained jacket. She didn't speak at first, just stared. When Ethan held up the scanner and asked for a signature, she hesitated, then mumbled, "It's heavy. I can't lift it. Could you please help me carry it out back, into the storage shed?" Ethan wasn't supposed to enter homes or attached structures, but it wasn't unheard of. And this woman didn't seem threatening, just frail, maybe a little mentally off. He agreed. The woman led him through the trailer to a back door, then down 2 concrete steps into the backyard. At the edge of the lot, surrounded by brush and a rusting clothesline, sat a small wooden shed about 10 feet by 12. The door hung crookedly from one hinge. The structure looked like it might collapse in the next storm. "There," she said, pointing, "just inside to the left." As Ethan stepped forward, he paused. "Is there a light?" She shook her head. "No electricity back there." He flicked on the flashlight from his phone and stepped inside. The air inside the shed was thick and still, like nothing had moved in years. Dust floated in the beam of light. The smell was dry, musty, with a faint hint of animal fur. On the left was a large wooden armoire, scratched and mold-speckled, with one door missing and the other barely hanging on. As Ethan turned to slide the package to the side of the shed, the light from his phone caught something behind the armoire. A figure, a man, standing upright, nearly motionless, the edge of a shoulder, a partial face, barely visible, but unmistakably human. He wasn't crouched or hiding. He was simply waiting. Ethan froze. The man didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. Without saying a word, Ethan turned, walked out of the shed and back toward the trailer. The woman stood at the back door, staring down at him with an unreadable expression. "All done," he said curtly. "Have a good night." As he reached the front steps of the trailer, her voice called after him. "You forgot something." He didn't turn around. Back at the depot, Ethan debated telling someone, his supervisor, the police, anyone. But what would he say? There was no crime, no proof, just a shed, a strange woman, and a silent man behind a cabinet. He wasn't injured. Nothing was stolen. He left safely. Still, the experience haunted him. The next morning, curiosity, or guilt, got the better of him. He searched the address in the system again. When he brought it up with a coworker who'd previously worked the same route, the man paled. "That place? I thought we stopped delivering there. There was some kind of welfare check years ago. Cops went out, found squatters and a bunch of weird stuff. I didn't think anyone still lived there." Later that day, Ethan drove by the area again in his own car. The trailer was still there, but now chained off at the gate. No lights, no movement. He never saw that woman again. And he never found out who or what was standing behind the armoire in that shed. Ethan Raleigh still delivers in rural Arkansas, though not in that area. He moved off that route a year later. No incident was ever reported from that trailer, and no official file exists with the police. But in delivery circles, drivers who work the outskirts, who take dirt roads to homes at the edge of the grid, there's a quiet rule. If a house has no lights, if a resident stares too long without blinking, if they ask you to carry something out back, don't. Because once you step past that door, you might not be alone. Eli Dawson had been driving nearly 16 hours straight when the engine light on his rig began blinking. He cursed under his breath and slowed down, pulling off at the next exit. Rain tapped against the windshield like tiny bones, and the desert air had turned unexpectedly cold for late September. There weren't many options along this stretch of highway, but just ahead, flickering through the drizzle, he saw the familiar neon buzz of Linden Hollow Truck Lodge. He'd passed it before, always a little uneasy at how deserted it looked, but tonight, he needed a place to crash. The woman at the front desk slid over a brass key attached to a cracked red tag. "Room 27, last one on the row. Heat's tricky," she muttered. Eli nodded. No small talk, no paperwork, just a heavy silence that seemed to hang in the lobby like cigarette smoke. Room 27 sat at the far end, detached slightly from the others as if it didn't want to belong. Inside, the air was bitterly cold. The heater rattled once when he adjusted the knob, then gave up. The blankets were thin, the mattress hard, and a strange smell lingered, like dust and something faintly metallic. But what really caught his eye was the radio. An old wooden tabletop unit sat on the nightstand. No power cord, no battery slot. Just sitting there, dead. Except it wasn't. At 2:58 a.m., just as Eli began to drift off, the radio clicked. Then came static, And then a voice, quiet, grainy, and desperate. "If anyone hears this, I'm in room 27. They're outside." Eli's eyes flew open. The room suddenly felt much colder. Eli stared at the radio. It wasn't plugged in. There was no CB equipment in the room, no explanation. He sat up, listening. "Still here. Room 27. Can anyone hear me?" The voice returned, slightly louder, male, shaking, then knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. Eli froze. "Who is it?" he called out. A pause. Then a calm male voice replied through the door. "Got your message. You said you needed help. I'm here." Eli stood slowly, eyes darting between the door and the window. "I didn't call for help," he said. "Radio did. I heard you say you were trapped." His hand hovered over the lock, but stopped cold when the man spoke again. "It's 313, Eli. Just let me in." He hadn't told anyone his name. His breath caught. The hallway outside had gone completely silent. He stepped to the curtain and peeked out. Nothing. No one. The lot was empty. No truck. No footsteps. No shadows. The radio crackled again. "Can't move. I'm still in here. Room 27. It wasn't just another message. It was his own voice. Exactly. Word for word. A thought he'd had moments earlier, but never spoken aloud. Something in the room was listening and repeating him. Eli didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat in the chair with his jacket wrapped around him, facing the radio. At some point, it stopped making noise, but the cold never left. Neither did the feeling that something, or someone, was still outside the door. At dawn, he grabbed his things, tossed the key on the front desk, and drove off without looking back. Oddly, the truck started just fine. No blinking engine light, no warning alarms, like the breakdown had never happened at all. Later that week, he was at a truck stop diner outside Flagstaff. While sipping stale coffee, he mentioned Linden Hollow to an older driver at the counter. The man turned slowly, eyes narrowing. "You stayed there?" "Yeah, room 27. The old man's face darkened. "Shouldn't be open anymore. There was a driver, Byron Ellis, years back. Died in that room. Heart failure, they said. But for weeks afterward, truckers kept picking up his voice on the CB." Eli blinked. "What did the voice say?" The man didn't smile. "Same thing, over and over. Still in room 27. Can anyone hear me?" Creeped a lot of us out. Eli didn't respond. His stomach twisted. "What day did he die?" "September 28th. Why?" That was the exact night Eli had stayed. A week later, Eli was hauling freight through the Mojave. Empty road, no radio chatter. Then, as the clock on the dash flipped to 3:13 a.m., his CB buzzed, a whisper breaking through static. "Still in room 27. If anyone hears this." It was his voice, and this time he hadn't even thought the words yet. Some rooms don't let go, and sometimes you bring them with you. My name is Eric Barnes. I've been driving freight between Phoenix and Salt Lake City for over a decade. I know every twist, pothole, and mile marker on Route 191, especially the stretch between Chinle and Moab. That road has its stories. I never used to believe them, not until that night. It was raining harder than usual, relentless, hammering down like the sky had opened up just for me. I'd left a warehouse in Flagstaff around 9 o'clock p.m. with a full load of refrigeration parts. The cab of my old Freightliner was warm, the hum of the engine familiar. The kind of night where you just focus on the road, let your thoughts drift. I was thinking about my family, my wife, Amy, always complaining I spend more time on the road than at home. She's not wrong. My boys are 17 and 19 now. I've watched them grow up mostly through video calls and gas station souvenirs. Somewhere near mile marker 136, I spotted him, a lone figure, by the roadside, arms raised, soaked to the bone. Normally, I don't stop for hitchhikers, not on that stretch, not after everything I've heard, People vanishing without a trace, robberies, bodies found months later down in dry creek beds. Route 199 has a reputation, but something about this guy, maybe it was the storm or the way he looked at me, almost pleading. I slowed down. I tapped the horn once. He rushed over and climbed in without a word. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, wearing a dark jacket that dripped water all over the floor mat. But it wasn't just rain. There was something else. An odor, faint but sharp, like damp earth and rusted metal. He didn't even look at me, just muttered, "Thanks." I tried to strike up conversation. "Where are you headed?" He kept his eyes forward. "Straight." His voice was low, dry, like someone who hadn't spoken in a long time. "Fine by me. I've had my share of silent rides." We rolled on for a while, just the sound of rain hammering the windshield and the hum of the tires on wet asphalt. Then, after maybe 15 minutes, he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You ever wonder how many people go missing on this road?" I glanced at him sideways just for a second. His eyes were fixed on the dark highway ahead, unblinking. "I guess people disappear all over," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral, especially in the middle of nowhere like this. He gave a dry chuckle, no humor in it. "Not like this, not here." He started listing cases. A trucker who pulled over to change a flat tire and was never seen again. A young couple on a weekend road trip. Last ping from their phones was on this very stretch. A family driving through at night. Whole car gone. No signs of struggle. No accidents. Just vanished. Each story came with precise details. Names, car models, locations down to the mile marker. It didn't feel like he was repeating rumors. It felt like testimony. The rain kept pouring. The road stretched on, black and endless. My knuckles tightened on the wheel. "Route 191, he whispered. "Eats people." I didn't respond, just kept driving, but my pulse was speeding up. Something about his voice, like he wasn't just remembering these things, like he had watched them happen. He turned slightly toward me then, and in the dashboard light, I finally saw his face clearly. His skin, pale, almost translucent. Beads of moisture clung to him, but he didn't seem cold, just still, too still. "There are places along this road," he said slowly, "where time forgets, where people fall through." He told me about a car found abandoned last spring, doors locked, keys in the ignition, interior dry as a bone, like it hadn't seen rain in weeks, despite the storm the night it vanished. No fingerprints, no belongings, no bodies. I felt the chill creeping through my spine. My eyes darted to the passenger seat. He still wasn't blinking. He stared forward again. His voice dropped lower, like it wasn't meant for the living. "There's one story no one ever heard. No police reports, no news. Only I remember it, because I lived it." He began to speak names. A man, Charles. His wife, Maria. Their kids, Ben, Lila, and Drew. A family of 5 driving through the desert on their way to visit relatives in Utah. The way he spoke, it wasn't storytelling. It was remembering. We left early, real early, around 2 a.m. The kids were asleep in the back. Maria was beside me. I was driving. He paused. I realized my mouth had gone dry. Everything was fine, until I saw something move by the shoulder, something big, taller than the power poles. It didn't walk. It glided. Not animal, not human. And then the lights cut out. The engine died. The world went quiet. He turned his head toward me again, his voice barely a breath. When I woke up, they were gone. I swallowed hard. My palms were slick with sweat. I drove for miles trying to find someone. When I reached a town, I thought I was saved. But it was wrong, empty, outdated, like time had stopped decades ago. He raised a hand and pointed ahead through the windshield. "Right there, just past that ridge, that gas station." A flash of lightning illuminated the silhouette of an old rundown station up ahead. I turned toward him, shaken. "You said they were gone, but you made it. You survived." He finally looked me straight in the eye, and for the first time that night, I saw that his eyes had no reflection. The glow from the dash dimmed for a split second, just enough to blur his face in shadow. And then, like a whisper drifting through the cab, he said, "They never found my family. Just me." Lightning flickered again, illuminating the derelict gas station up ahead. A rusted sign creaked in the wind. No lights, no signs of life. I waited for days, called out to them, but no one came. No one ever came. He pointed toward a large oak tree just past the station, its twisted limbs silhouetted against the dark sky. I couldn't live with what happened, so I ended it, right there. My heart dropped, hung myself from that tree. I didn't want to keep driving, but I guess some part of me never stopped. I turned to look. His seat was empty, just like that, gone. I slammed the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The silence inside the cab was deafening. The rain outside had slowed to a mist, the kind that clings to your skin like cold breath. I turned on the dome light. The passenger seat was soaked, as if someone had just been there, dripping wet. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and searched. Route 199 family disappearance, Arizona. There it was, a local article from 6 years ago. Charles Monroe, 42, found dead near old gas station off Route 191. Vehicle found nearby. Wife and 3 children still missing. The photo attached showed a red Dodge Caravan, doors locked, no visible damage. I looked up. The tree he'd pointed at. I could see it now. A frayed rope still hung from one of the lower branches. I sat there for a long time, engine idling, wipers brushing away the mist. Eventually, I drove on. I didn't stop again until sunrise. That was 2 years ago. I've driven hundreds of routes since then, seen all kinds of weather, all kinds of people. But sometimes, when it's late and the rain hits just right, I check my rearview mirror. And I swear, just for a moment, I see a man standing by the roadside, soaked and pale, hand raised, asking for a ride. And every time, I keep driving. There's a stretch of I-90 near the Montana-Idaho border that most truckers pass without a second thought. I wish I had done the same. It was around 3:30 in the morning when I pulled into an empty rest area, just a quick stop to fix a strap and use the bathroom. But what I experienced inside that dim, silent building still haunts me. I thought I was alone. I was wrong. And the worst part? No one will believe what happened next. The night had been long but uneventful. I was on my way to Portland, cruising through the winding mountain highway under a sky full of stars. The hum of the engine, the rhythm of the road. It was almost calming. Then I noticed one of my load straps had come loose. Not a big deal. I'd fix it quickly, maybe take a bathroom break, and be back on the road in minutes. The rest area appeared like a ghost out of the trees, dimly lit, isolated, dead quiet. There was only one other truck in the lot, parked near the end with its curtains drawn tight. No movement, no lights. Whoever was inside was clearly asleep. I pulled into a spot, killed the engine, and stepped out into the cool spring air. But the second my boots hit the ground, I noticed it. The cold. Not just spring chill, but a sudden, unnatural drop in temperature. The kind that bites through your jacket and settles in your bones. It hadn't felt like that a moment ago. I shook it off. Probably just the elevation or the time of night. I walked around to the back of the trailer and tightened the strap. As I turned to head toward the building, that's when I saw it. A shadow in the window. At first I thought it was my reflection, but it moved. Not with me, but independently. A tall, vague silhouette that shifted sideways and vanished from view the moment I looked directly at it. I froze. My first thought was logical. It must have been the driver from the other truck. Maybe he'd gone in to use the restroom too. Maybe the glass just played tricks on my eyes. That's what I told myself as I walked toward the building. But something felt wrong. The air felt heavier with each step. The lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow over the pavement. Every instinct told me to turn around, get back in the truck, and drive. Strap be damned. But I kept walking, because logic still had the wheel. That wouldn't last much longer. The door to the rest area creaked slightly as I pushed it open. Immediately, a suffocating silence hit me. Not the peaceful kind. This was unnatural, like sound itself had been sucked out of the air. I paused in the doorway, heart beating a little harder now, straining to hear anything. A distant hum, the buzz of a light fixture, maybe footsteps from the other trucker. But there was nothing. You could have heard a pin drop from across the building. I took a breath and stepped inside. The layout was strange. Unlike most rest stops with rows of stalls, this one had a series of small individual bathrooms with locking doors, almost like little private closets. The hall was dim, with dull tile floors and walls that echoed every footstep. I chose one of the single restrooms at random, entered, and locked the door behind me. As I stood at the urinal trying to shake the uneasy feeling crawling down my spine, I heard it, a loud rattle from the outside hallway. It sounded like a janitor's cart, wheels clunking awkwardly across uneven tile, metal tools clinking with every bounce. That would have been strange enough on its own. But then came the knock. No, not a knock. Someone yanked the handle. Hard. The door jolted against the lock as if someone was trying to come in, even though I had only entered seconds earlier. My first reaction was irritation. I muttered, "Occupied," under my breath, but it came out dry and uneasy. Something about the pull felt too aggressive, too rushed, like whoever was out there didn't care if the door was locked or not. Then it got worse. Without warning, every toilet in the building began to flush, one after the other, rapid, chaotic. The sound roared through the pipes like a rolling wave. I stood frozen, still at the urinal, trying to process what I was hearing. There was no way someone could have activated them all manually. There weren't enough people here for that. In fact, I hadn't seen a single person since I pulled in. Panic crept in. My breathing became shallow, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. I reached for the door latch, but just as I touched it, everything stopped. The toilets, the rattling, the air itself seemed to freeze in place. Dead silence again. I hesitated, hand still on the lock. I didn't want to open the door. Every part of me said, don't. But something else pushed me to look, to confirm that this wasn't just in my head. So I opened it, slowly, and peeked out into the hallway. It was empty. No cart, no footsteps, no sound. I even checked a few of the other bathroom doors. Each one was unoccupied. My heart was thudding in my ears, but even that felt muted against the overwhelming silence pressing in around me. Something was wrong with this place, and it wasn't done with me yet. I stood there, just outside the bathroom, staring down a hallway that seemed too quiet, too still, like time had stopped moving. My instincts screamed that I needed to leave, but a strange part of me kept searching for an explanation. I couldn't accept that what I'd just experienced might have been something unnatural. Still, I walked softly along the corridor, trying not to make noise. I checked a few more bathroom stalls, cracked open some of the individual doors. Each one was completely empty. Not a single footprint, not a sound, not even the faintest trace of someone having been there. Just cold tile and silence. That rattling janitor cart? Gone. No sign of it. No maintenance closet nearby. No wheeled equipment that might have made that noise. The layout was too small for someone to have slipped out without me noticing. And yet, there was no one. I stepped back into the common area, and that's when I felt it. A pressure. Not physical, but atmospheric. Like the air had thickened around me. Every inch of my skin prickled. I turned slowly, scanning every corner, every shadow, my breath shallow and uneven. That's when I knew. I wasn't alone. I couldn't see it. I couldn't hear it. But I knew. Something was watching me. Something was aware of me. Not curious, not playful, but deliberate, intentional. Like it was letting me feel its presence just long enough to break my nerves. The moment broke when I heard a soft creak from behind me. Not mechanical, not the building settling, but a deliberate, slow sound, like someone shifting their weight on old linoleum. I didn't look. I couldn't. I turned and bolted toward the exit, forcing my legs to move even as the panic rose like a flood in my chest. I didn't stop to glance back, didn't slow down to question the logic. Every step felt like I was being chased by something I couldn't name. As I pushed through the doors back into the night air, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. But the dread didn't stop there. I was halfway down the sidewalk, heading back to my truck, when one of the overhead streetlights above me flickered, then snapped off entirely. Darkness dropped like a curtain. I froze under the sudden shadow, staring up at the now dead bulb. My breath clouded in the air, and for a brief second, I felt like I had stepped into another layer of reality, one where I didn't belong. That was it. I ran. Dead sprint. No shame. I practically dove into the cab of my truck, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I sat there, panting, staring straight ahead with my hands clenched on the wheel. And then I checked my phone. No signal. No bars. No data. Nothing. That was the final nail. Whatever was happening here, I was cut off. Alone. And all I could do was get the hell out before it decided to follow. I didn't wait another second. The truck roared to life beneath me as I twisted the key with shaking hands. I threw it into gear and peeled out of the rest area lot like something was chasing me. Because in that moment, it felt like something was. The road ahead was empty, but I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see that dark figure from the window standing under the broken streetlight, or worse, running behind me. But nothing was there. Still, the feeling didn't leave me. That overwhelming sense that I had stepped into something I wasn't meant to see, or worse, something that wasn't meant to see me. The silence, the flushing toilets, the cold air, the shadow in the glass, all of it had felt calculated. Like it had been waiting, watching, playing. When I finally got far enough down the highway for a signal to return, I didn't call anyone. I couldn't. What would I even say? Hey, I stopped at a haunted rest area and almost pissed myself in terror because invisible toilets flushed and a ghost shut off a streetlight? They'd laugh. I'd laugh. If it didn't still make my skin crawl every time I remembered it. Instead, I kept driving. Later that week, out of curiosity, I looked the place up on Trucker Path, a kind of Yelp for drivers app we all use on the road. I wanted to see if maybe someone else had experienced what I had. Most reviews were boring. Clean enough, good lighting, no vending machines. But buried near the bottom was one review that had been upvoted dozens of times. It was just one word: ghosts. I stared at it for a long time, hands cold on my phone screen. Someone else had felt it. Someone else had been there, seen something. Maybe they didn't tell the full story. Maybe, like me, they figured no one would believe them anyway. There were also a few photos of the area, quiet, peaceful during the day. But in one of them, way in the background, I spotted a small cluster of white roadside crosses, the kind that marks where people have died. I'd missed them entirely that night. But now, I couldn't help but wonder, had the rest area always been like that? Or had something made it that way? People say the road is lonely. They're right. But sometimes what's worse than being alone is realizing you're not. Not when the world should be sleeping. Not when the air turns cold without warning. Not when the laughter or footsteps or shadows show up with no explanation. I haven't stopped at that rest area since. I don't plan to. And if you ever find yourself driving west on I-90 near the Montana-Idaho line around 3 a.m., keep going, even if you really need to stop. Whatever's there, it's waiting. In the fall of 2019, A 37-year-old truck driver named Jason Marlowe was assigned a long overnight route, hauling handcrafted wooden furniture from San Diego to El Centro, California. The route spanned across vast stretches of open desert, barren, dry, and unlit. Jason, a seasoned long-haul driver with more than a decade on the road, was used to the silence and stillness of these nocturnal drives. But on that particular night, something felt off. At approximately 11:45 p.m., Jason reported to dispatch that he was making steady progress, about an hour out from his midway stop. He had no intention of sleeping yet. The road was clear, the air cool, and traffic non-existent. His only companion was the sound of his diesel engine and the occasional static of the CB radio. Then, in the distance ahead, Jason noticed flashing hazard lights. Slowing down, he spotted an older model Chevy Impala, parked just off the road in a patch of dirt. The car appeared abandoned. No one inside, no movement, no footprints around the vehicle that he could see. Jason pulled his rig to the shoulder, retrieved his tactical flashlight from the compartment beneath the passenger seat, and approached the car, intending to offer help. He knocked on the windows. No response. He circled the vehicle. Nothing. That's when he noticed something behind the car, a small, run-down gas station, half sunken in the desert darkness. Jason hadn't seen it on the map, nor did he recall passing it on any previous route. But there it was. Faded signage, a cracked concrete forecourt, 2 ancient pumps, and behind it, a single squat building. Feeling a growing sense of unease, Jason crossed the dirt lot and approached the building. The front door was jammed open, hanging off its hinges. Jason shined his flashlight into the building. Inside was a disused convenience store, shelves rusted and empty, floorboards warped by time and heat. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. He stepped in and called out, just in case. His voice echoed faintly. Then, from somewhere deep inside the store came the sound of shuffling movement, like someone dragging a shoe across concrete. Jason froze. "I'm here to help," he said, projecting his voice calmly. "Is someone hurt?" No reply, just silence, and then a low whisper from beyond the shelves. "You shouldn't be here." Jason's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure if he'd imagined it. It was a deep, raspy voice, low and close. It wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't a plea either. It was a warning. Then, from a far corner of the building, he heard heavy breathing, unmistakably human, labored, shaky. Jason backed away, beam shaking in his hand. He turned toward the door. That's when he heard it. A scream. A woman's scream, muffled but sharp, high-pitched and terrified. It came from the back of the building behind the shelves. Jason ran. He bolted out of the store, stumbling back into the open desert air. His boots crunched against gravel as he sprinted to his truck, fumbling for his phone. He called 911. While relaying his location to dispatch, explaining the abandoned car, the gas station, the scream, he glanced toward the roadside. The Chevy Impala was gone. The car that had been parked just moments ago was no longer there. No tire marks, no dust kicked up, just empty space. Still on the phone with 911, Jason made a decision that most people would avoid. He went back into the building. He couldn't walk away, not after hearing that scream. The interior felt colder now. The flashlight illuminated dust particles suspended in the air, swirling like smoke. Jason followed the path toward the back of the store, toward where the breathing had been. And there, on the floor, he saw it. A pool of blood. Fresh, thick, still wet. There were no signs of a body, no visible victim, just the blood, enough to suggest a serious injury, possibly fatal. Jason relayed the discovery to the 911 operator, who immediately escalated the call. State troopers were dispatched to the location. Within 45 minutes, law enforcement arrived. They questioned Jason extensively. He described the voice, the scream, the vehicle, the blood. He described the black Chevy Impala, likely early 2000s model. Unfortunately, he didn't have a dash cam at the time. He couldn't provide a license plate. And there were no surveillance cameras at the gas station because the station itself had been decommissioned in 1994. When police ran the address, they found that the site had been officially shut down and condemned over 2 decades earlier. No records of anyone maintaining it, no recent property activity, nothing. Forensics teams collected samples from the bloodstain. Jason was told they'd be analyzed and cross-referenced with missing persons reports. He never heard back. He installed a dash cam in his rig the following week. To this day, the incident remains unsolved. No suspect, no victim, no case file closed. Just a long stretch of desert highway, a gas station that shouldn't be there, and a driver who saw too much. Jason still drives that route from time to time, but he never stops near mile marker 233, not even to stretch his legs. Because sometimes, the places we think are long forgotten aren't. And if you ever find yourself driving down a desert road and see a car pulled over beside a shuttered gas station, just keep going. It was the last haul before Christmas. Travis Colburn, a long-haul driver out of Montana, had been pushing through icy back roads in northern Colorado. A late winter storm was blowing in, and the snow had started falling sideways. His windshield was frosting at the corners. Visibility? Nearly zero. When the CB squawked with a faint voice, "Nearest safe pull-off, Briarstone Depot. Use lane 13." He didn't even think. He just turned the wheel at the next faded green sign. The depot wasn't on any of his route apps, no mention on the highway map either, but there it was, an old freight yard turned rest stop, surrounded by frost-bitten pine trees and empty fencing. The entrance gate stood open, no guards, no booths, just a narrow lane lined with flickering overhead lights, and a single wooden sign, lane 13, semi-parking. Something about the number made his stomach tighten. He pulled in slowly. The entire depot was too quiet. No engines idling, no chatter, no other trucks. The snow on the pavement looked undisturbed, like no one had parked there in days. But his eyes were dry, his neck stiff, and the storm was picking up fast. Travis backed his truck into the marked slot at the very end of lane 13, killed the engine, and sat in the silence for a minute, letting the warmth of the cab settle around him. Outside, the snow kept falling. The first thing Travis noticed when he woke up was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that pressed on your ears like the world outside had been muted. No wind, no snow hitting the windshield, just nothing. He rubbed his eyes. The windows were frosted over, but a faint gray light peeked through. Morning, maybe? He turned the key. The truck came to life instantly. No chug, no delay. That was the first thing that felt off. Then he reached for his phone. Still no signal. Still no time displayed. Shrugging it off, he shifted into drive and rolled forward, following the lane that curved gently to the left toward the main exit gate. Except, when he reached it, the gate was no longer open. It wasn't closed either. It was just gone. In its place stood a chain-link fence, stretching end to end like it had always been there. No seams, no hinges, no control box. "What the hell?" Travis muttered, frowning. He swung the rig around and retraced his path, tires crunching snow that hadn't been disturbed. When he circled the far end of the depot and came back toward the entrance, he passed the same crooked sign, lane 13, semi-parking. The same skid marks from his trailer, the same flickering light pole, the exact same patch of oil on the ground beneath where he'd parked. He'd driven a full loop, only to end up right where he started. Travis's fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter. He turned again, faster this time, followed a different path, swerved between the loading docks, took a side alley that looked promising, but it all twisted back on itself. No matter which route he tried, he always returned to lane 13. Same snow, same silence, same trap. Travis was sweating. Even with the heater off and the snow still falling, his palms were slick and his breath came fast. He'd circled the depot twice now. Same landmarks, same tire tracks, same damn lane 13 every single time. Something was wrong with this place. It wasn't just empty, it was dead, like it had been waiting for someone exactly like him. He gritted his teeth and gripped the wheel again. "All right, one more time," he muttered. "Straight shot, no turns." The rig rumbled forward, tires skidding slightly on the iced-over concrete. The depot was utterly still, like it was holding its breath. As he passed the row of broken lampposts for the third time, something shifted. The shadows moved. Not drastically, just enough for him to notice. Something in his peripheral, a figure, a blink of motion behind the frost-covered windows of the office shack. He didn't stop to check, just kept going. As he neared what should have been another dead-end curve, his headlights caught something different. A narrow path between two loading docks that hadn't been there before. No sign, no barriers, just open blackness. A way out. Heart thudding, Travis turned in. It was tight, almost too narrow for the truck. But he didn't care. The walls scraped his side mirrors. A metal pole clipped his left trailer corner, sparks flying. Then, a flash of light. A break in the trees. The sound of the highway beyond the depot. His tires hit asphalt that didn't loop. It kept going. He was out. He didn't slow down. Didn't check GPS. Didn't stop for fuel. He just drove. Miles. Then hours. Until the depot was nothing but a bad memory behind him. And he never looked in the rearview mirror. Not once. Because deep down, he knew, if he had turned around, the exit might not have been there at all. I've been working for a rural waste management company in Pennsylvania for about 8 years now. Most people think garbage collection is just a morning gig, but in the dead heat of summer, we start early, real early, so we're not boiling alive by midday. I clock in at 2 a.m., before the sun even dreams of rising. There's a strange kind of peace to being on the road when no one else is. You get used to the silence, the fog rolling across the hills, the way deer dart across in your high beams like ghosts in flight. I used to think nothing out there could scare me. But then came that night on Route 209, a night that still gnaws at me like teeth in the dark. It happened in late July, humid and moonless. Just after 3 a.m., I was on one of the back roads near Cressona. No streetlights, barely any houses, just trees pressing in on both sides like an overgrown tunnel. I had music playing low, windows cracked open. Everything was as normal as it gets, until I saw them. At first, it was just a dark shape in the distance, something that broke the flow of the white lines and asphalt. As I got closer, my headlights picked out the outline, a person, crouched or sitting in the exact center of the road, not on the shoulder, not walking, just sitting there, like the road was their living room and I was the intruder. They wore a hoodie, the kind that shadowed your face completely in the right light, or lack thereof. Their hands were on their knees. They were facing directly toward me, and they weren't moving. At first, I slowed down out of instinct. Maybe someone had crashed their car or needed help. My stomach turned when I realized there were no vehicles around, no wreckage, no flashlight, just this one figure, motionless and unnatural. I crept forward until I was maybe 10 yards away, my brights shining directly at them. Still no movement. I honked, short, then long blasts. Then I hit the air horn, the one that makes people jump a foot in the air. Nothing. No flinch, no glance, not even a twitch. They just sat there. That's when the fear really hit. You ever feel your animal brain kick in before your logical brain can form a thought? That primal alert that says, "This is wrong, leave now." I felt it deep in my spine. Every inch of me told me to back away. I didn't ask questions. I didn't lean out the window. I didn't even consider stepping out of the cab. I grabbed the gear shift, slammed it into reverse, and slowly backed away, headlights still aimed at the thing sitting in the road. For a moment, I expected it to rise and charge, or vanish, or something, but it didn't. It stayed completely still as I reversed down the road, like it wanted me to keep watching. When I was far enough to breathe again, I threw the truck into drive and took the first turn I saw, nearly skidding off the gravel shoulder. I didn't care. I didn't even radio it in. What was I going to say? "Hey, dispatch, there's a hoodie person blocking the road who doesn't move when I honk." No one would believe me. Hell, I barely believed it myself. I thought about it every night after that. I even drove back the same route a few days later, in broad daylight, just to prove to myself it was nothing. There was nothing there. No footprints, no accident site, no trash or debris that might have looked like a person in the dark. But I swear, I know what I saw. For weeks, I'd jolt awake around 3 a.m., gasping, sometimes certain that I'd hear knuckles rapping on the driver's side window. Once, I dreamed I was stuck in the truck with no reverse, no brakes, and the figure slowly rising as I rolled closer, hoodie still hiding its face. Eventually, I told a guy I work with, Marty, a veteran of the job. Real quiet, drinks a lot of black coffee, doesn't say much unless it's important. He listened without interrupting, nodded slowly and said, "You didn't get out, right?" "No, God no." He sipped his coffee and gave me a look that said more than words ever could. Then, with a voice low and serious, he added, "Good. Someone sat in the road like that a few years ago, not far from Schuylkill Haven. Another driver got out to check, didn't come back. Cops found the truck still idling, door wide open, never found him." I stared at him. "You're messing with me." I wish I was. He finished his coffee and walked off. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I stepped out of the truck that night. What would I have seen under that hood? A face, a void? Maybe it was someone playing a sick prank. Or maybe it wasn't someone at all. I think that's what scares me the most. Not what I saw, but what I didn't. The lack of any human reaction, any logic or reason. It wasn't just eerie. It was wrong. Like it didn't belong to our world. Or like it was waiting for something. I've since changed routes. I don't drive Route 209 anymore, especially not after midnight. I try not to think about what's still out there. But every now and then, when I'm on a back road and the fog rolls in thick, I find myself tapping the horn, just in case. Some things in this world can't be explained. And not everything out there wants to be found or understood. If your gut tells you to run, listen. Fear is there for a reason. Because sometimes when you see something that doesn't move, doesn't flinch, doesn't feel human, it's because it isn't. And the road doesn't always lead you away from danger. Sometimes it brings you right to it. In February 2020, a 45-year-old long-haul trucker named Gary Lindell was traveling east through western Oklahoma, making a routine delivery to Fort Smith. He'd been on the road for over 11 hours and decided to pull off at a quiet truck stop along Route 270, just outside a near-abandoned town called Pine Hollow. The stop had only a few trucks parked. Most of the lights in the diner section were off, and the place felt like it hadn't seen a crowd in years. Rain fell steadily outside, coating the lot in a silvery glaze under the flickering sodium lamps. Gary went inside to grab a coffee and stretch his legs. The graveyard shift cashier, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, gave him a brief nod but said nothing until he paid. Then she spoke in a low voice. "Keep your doors locked tonight. Guy's been hanging around lately. Real quiet. Watches people. Doesn't buy anything." Gary raised an eyebrow. "Homeless?" She shook her head. "No, he doesn't look homeless. Just off." Gary gave a polite nod and walked back to his truck. About 20 minutes later, Gary realized he needed to use the restroom. The bathroom was in a separate building, a short walk from the main shop. He grabbed the key from the counter and headed out into the rain. The wind had picked up, rattling the flimsy aluminum awning overhead. The exterior light near the restroom door flickered weakly, barely holding a glow. As Gary stepped inside, the musty smell hit him first. Damp walls, old bleach, and something metallic. The restroom was empty. 2 stalls, 1 urinal, 1 sink. He chose the larger stall, locked the door behind him, and went about his business. Then the light snapped off. Total darkness. There was no flicker, no dimming, just a hard, instant cut, like someone had flipped a switch or killed the power entirely. Gary froze. For several seconds, he sat in complete silence, waiting to see if the light would come back on. It didn't. No sound from outside, just the distant whisper of rain on the metal roof. With a growing knot in his chest, Gary reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. The screen glow brought a small comfort. He turned on the flashlight. The stark beam of white light cut through the dark. He aimed it at the ceiling fixture. The bulb was intact. Then, without warning, the overhead light turned back on. Bright, sudden, like someone had flipped the switch from outside. Gary turned off his flashlight, stepped out of the stall, washed his hands quickly, and tried the door. It wouldn't open. The knob turned freely, but the door felt jammed or held shut. At first, he tried pushing harder, still wouldn't move. He stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the frame. That's when he heard it. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, walking past the outside wall. The way sound travels through thin aluminum siding, you could hear everything. The footsteps circled around, then stopped. Silence again. And then, the door swung open easily. No resistance, as if nothing had ever been wrong. Gary stepped outside into the cold rain. The walkway was empty, no sign of movement. The light above the bathroom now glowed steadily, as if it had never flickered. Back at the counter, he returned the key. The cashier didn't look up from her crossword. She just asked, "You see him?" Gary shook his head. No, but it felt like someone was out there. And the lights. She finally looked at him. Yeah, that's how it starts. Back in the truck, Gary opened the cab and immediately noticed something off. The passenger side door was unlatched, just barely, but clearly not sealed. He was sure he'd locked it. His gloves had fallen to the floor. The paper map he kept in the dash compartment was open. His coffee was knocked over. None of it made sense. He searched the cab. Every corner, every crevice. No one was there. But the air inside the cab felt wrong. As if it had been stirred recently. As if someone had been sitting there, silently watching, then left without a trace. There were no muddy footprints, no signs of forced entry, just enough changes to know he hadn't been alone. Gary didn't sleep that night. He left the truck stop and drove until sunrise, eventually pulling over at a crowded station closer to the interstate. He's never taken Route 270 again. There are places where nothing ever seems to happen. But sometimes that's only because the wrong thing happens quietly. No screams, no fights, just a locked door, a cut light, a misplaced glove, and something watching, waiting for the right driver to stop for the night. My name's Tyler Grady. I've been hauling freight through the Southwest for over 12 years now, mostly on the I-40 corridor from California to Texas. It's a lonely life, but I've come to love the stillness of the desert highways, especially after dark. Fewer cars, fewer distractions, just the hum of the road and the steady thrum of my rig. One night, somewhere past midnight, I was heading eastbound through northern New Mexico. I'd been behind the wheel for close to 10 hours, longer than I should have been, honestly. My eyelids were heavy and my second thermos of coffee was doing nothing. I needed to stop, just for a bit, stretch my legs, breathe something that wasn't cab air and burnt diesel. Around mile marker 287, I spotted a flickering neon sign off the shoulder, a rest stop I didn't remember seeing before. But that wasn't unusual. There are dozens of little roadside stops out there that come and go like tumbleweeds. I took the exit. The road leading in was rough, cracked with weeds pushing through the asphalt. My headlights caught glimpses of an old building, a squat, faded structure with a crooked roof. Valley Vista Rest Stop, the sign said in flickering red letters. The lot was empty. No cars, no trucks, not even a vending machine hum. Still, the lights were on. That was good enough for me. I pulled in, parked near the building, and stepped out into the dry night air. It was oddly quiet. No wind, no insects, just Silence. Even the usual buzz of the high-voltage lights was missing. As I approached the door, a faint sound came from inside, a radio crackling softly. Some old tune from the 50s. I couldn't make out the words, just that distant, grainy melody, like it was coming from another time entirely. I pushed open the glass door. It didn't squeak. It didn't creak. It just opened. And that's when I noticed something was wrong. Everything inside looked like it had been frozen in time. A small diner-style counter with stools, a magazine rack filled with travel guides from 1996, a vending machine labeled Crystal Pepsi, and dust. Dust on everything. Thick, undisturbed, like no one had walked through here in decades, except the lights were still on, and the radio was still playing. The air inside was wrong. Not just dusty, heavy, like it hadn't been breathed in years. The kind of air you find in sealed-off basements or forgotten attics. My boots left clear prints on the dusty linoleum floor. The dust was so thick it muffled the sound of my steps. Yet the radio kept playing. It sat on a shelf behind the counter, an old wood-paneled set with a cracked plastic dial, glowing faintly green. The song ended, replaced by static. Then, without warning, a voice came through. A broadcast, but the signal was broken, like a station barely hanging on. Valley Vista Rest. Open 24 hours. Traveling families welcome. Remember to stop in and... The voice cut out again, lost to the crackle of the airwaves. I walked toward the vending machines in the corner. Their lights were on, but the selection was bizarre. Brands I hadn't seen in years. Zima, Surge, Mellow Yellow in glass bottles. Some of the packaging had faded or peeled. A Snickers bar dated 1995 sat behind the plastic. Something clanged in the back. I froze. It sounded like a door swinging shut. A metal-on-metal echo. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here?" No answer. I stepped past the restroom doors and peeked down a narrow hallway that led toward the maintenance room. A flickering fluorescent bulb hung from the ceiling, barely alive. That's when I noticed the smell, faint but distinct. Charred wood, burnt plastic. A scent I knew well from a highway wreck I'd seen years ago. Smoke. But there was no fire. The hallway ended at a service door, half open. Inside was a tiny break room, or what was left of one. A melted coffee pot. Chairs scorched and warped. Black marks up the walls. Burn patterns. My heart skipped. I backed away. Back in the main room, I noticed something I'd missed before. A fire extinguisher lying on the floor covered in soot. The ceiling above the front desk, also charred. Water damage. The kind of destruction you'd see after a fire had already been put out, years ago. And yet the lights were still on. The radio still played. I took out my phone. No signal. Of course. I snapped a picture of the vending machine, just to document how strange it all was. But when I checked the screen, nothing was there, just black. Every photo I took came out pitch dark, like the lens had been covered. My nerves were raw now. I turned to leave, but just as I reached the glass doors, they wouldn't open. The automatic sensor didn't respond, and when I tried to push them manually, nothing, locked tight. That's when the radio behind the counter clicked again. Valley Vista Rest burned to the ground on August 14, 1997. No survivors, cause still unknown. I stood frozen. That wasn't music, that was a news report. Static followed, then silence. I turned around slowly. The lights above me began to dim, one by one. I didn't wait for the last bulb to go dark. I backed away from the doors, heart pounding, hands fumbling for anything that would get me out. There was an emergency exit near the bathrooms. I sprinted toward it, boots sliding across the dusty tile. It was stuck, rusted at the hinges. I slammed into it with my shoulder once, twice. On the third hit, the door burst open and I stumbled into the cold night air, landing hard on the cracked pavement. The silence outside was even worse than inside. No insects, no wind, just dead air. I scrambled back to my truck, hands shaking as I yanked the door open and climbed inside. I didn't care about the rest break anymore. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. As I pulled out of the lot, I looked into the side mirror. The building was still there, dimly lit, flickering neon buzzing faintly. But just for a second, I saw figures standing behind the dusty glass windows, watching. I didn't stop driving until I reached a gas station near Santa Rosa, nearly 50 miles east. The place was brightly lit, buzzing with life. The fluorescent lights had never looked more welcoming. I got out, found a phone signal, and started Googling like mad. Valley Vista Rest Stop, Northern New Mexico Rest Stop Fire. Finally, I found it. August 14th, 1997. An isolated rest stop called Valley Vista caught fire during the night. Cause undetermined. 3 employees inside. 1 cook, 1 cashier, 1 maintenance tech. All killed. The site was condemned, never rebuilt. There were photos, a charred foundation, ashes, burned up vending machines melted into slag. Nothing like the building I'd just walked out of. I sat there, staring at my phone for what felt like hours. Eventually, I checked the time. Just past 3 o'clock a.m. I went back out to the lot, tried to calm myself down, convincing myself it had been a hallucination. Sleep deprivation, stress. Maybe I dozed off behind the wheel and dreamed it all. But when I opened the passenger door to get something from the glove box, my boots had tracked in black soot. I hadn't noticed it before, but it was there, smeared across the floor mat. The same soot from that break room, that hallway, that scorched fire extinguisher. And in my cup holder, beside my half-empty thermos, sat a crystal Pepsi bottle, slightly cracked. It wasn't there before. That was last winter. I still take I-40, but I don't stop on that stretch anymore. Not near mile marker 287. Not even if I'm dead tired. And if I ever see a neon sign flickering in the distance, playing old music from another time, I keep driving, and I don't look back. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. But tell us, which story haunted you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read them all. And if you've got a chilling tale from the road, we want to hear it. Don't forget to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell. Until next time, drive safe and watch your mirrors.